Justin, welcome to the podcast. How are
Hey,
you?
thanks for having me.
So you're an author
Okay.
and a keynote speaker. That's incredible. Coming from where you have to where you are now. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump into it. Why don't you tell me how your addiction got started?
So my addiction started at a very young age. I was growing up and I had low self-esteem, low self-worth, low self-confidence, but you don't know that when you're growing up. I didn't have that self-esteem, self-worth, and self-confidence, so I quickly became a people pleaser at a very
Mm.
young age. I was seeking validation, trying to get my,
Mm-hmm.
I always wanted to be bigger, I wanted to be stronger, I wanted to be faster. I remember one time I'd get on the phone and I'd phone up my buddy and his mom would answer and she would like, "Hey, Calvin, it's either Justin or a girl on the phone." I'd be like, "Oh man, like I can hear you. I'm still here,"
Mm-hmm.
but I had a softer voice, right? So I always prayed to be bigger, stronger, faster. And what I didn't realize is that with that self esteem and self worth issues, I was searching for validation from other people, but I was also doing that by making them laugh.
Mm.
And for me to make them laugh, I would often make fun of myself. But then all of a sudden, I start to look at myself as a failure, right?
Mm.
So at a young age, I started to develop insecurities. I started to wear a mask, and I attached a lot of my self worth to what people thought of me, to athletics and sports. I got
Mm.
cut a lot from rep hockey teams growing up, and watching my buddies come to school with their game day jerseys on Fridays. That might not seem like a lot to some people, but to me, that was everything. You know, I loved hockey. I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
Canadian. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of us do. And so I attached a lot of my work to sports and being cut from that and not thinking that I'm good enough.
Mm.
So,
Was there any drinking at home? Like, was that something you grew up around?
yeah, there was a lot of drinking around with my parents. You know,
Mm.
when I was when I was 8, my parents got divorced. Right, I remember
Mm.
coming home from a camping trip, and there was drinking on the camping trip. And I got home, I saw a for sale sign in front of my house, and I asked my mom, like, "Well, what is this?" And she says, "Well, sometimes a mommy and daddy they don't live together." Right, and I still remember looking at this sign from my kitchen window, looking down at it, not knowing what it meant. But I went to go live with my mom. Usually, kids go live with their mom, and I didn't get along with my stepdad. You know,
Mm.
Actually, there was a point where I talk about it in my keynote speech. Is the first time I ever felt powerless in my life was when I was 10 years old. I was driving with him and my stepbrother, and he looked over. He's like, "Would you fight your stepbrother?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" Right? Not thinking anything of it. All of a sudden, the truck veers off the road, and he says, "Get out! You can fight him right here." I'm like, I got confused. I got scared, and I put my head down and told him to take me home. My stepbrother was 5 or 6 inches bigger than me, and that was the first time I felt powerless in my life. Eventually, my mom saw that I couldn't live there, so I went to go live with my dad. And my dad, he would always have a six pack, but I've only ever seen my dad drunk once in my life. But he always had beers around,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you play sports, you watch sports on TV. Drinking when you go to there's drinking at hockey games, there's beer sponsors, there's all this kind of stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah.
looking at it, you always think it's fine, it's normal, right? But I didn't drink much in high school. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
really for me. But when I got out of high school, I moved away to play junior hockey. I actually made it. I made junior hockey. I was so pumped. I remember I got cut from a couple of teams. That I found a team that took me, and I was so excited. This is my dream. I wanted to go play junior hockey. But when I moved away to play junior hockey at 18 years old, I found alcohol. I was living at a billet house, but we had an apartment, and the billets weren't there all the time. They lived out of town, but they got it for their kids. So that's the house I had. And, I was for the first time on my own, and I didn't have people that were really responsible for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in this town playing junior hockey and going home and going to hockey. And then all of a sudden, I found alcohol a little bit. But I remember one time I was sitting down with a buddy down in his billet parents' house, and I remember being downstairs, and we had a beer each from his beer fridge that his billet would just said, "Hey, if you want some beers, just have these out of the fridge." And I remember finishing mine, and I looked at him, and just waiting for him to finish his, right? And I'm like, oh, I just remember that the antsy feeling I had. Okay, well, I hope he finishes his so we can get another one. So he finished his, I get one, and I finished mine before his, and I remember sitting there, oh man, I really want another one. And now looking back on it, I'm like, oh, that's the first time I really like had that drive to have more alcohol. I was about 19 years old. So I went from like not drinking to almost an alcoholic right away, to craving it, to needing it, to showing up at practice hungover, and
So
the
hang on
assistant
now.
coach being like, Justin, you smell like booze.
So what did it give you? Like the way that you describe it there, it was almost like it tasted good, but we didn't really talk about the feeling. You drank that first beer. Like, how did it make you feel? Mm-hmm.
Self-esteem,
Mm.
self-worth, self-confidence. This Justin Brien that, wanted to be outgoing, that wanted to talk a lot. I found this newfound confidence in myself that I really thought I enjoyed. I thought other people enjoyed, and I would make people laugh. And then all of a sudden, hey, there's more validation coming my way. But what
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize is that everything was giving me was fake, right? And everything as soon started to take away from me was very real. My last year of junior hockey I was drinking on the bus rides home from games, and I was drinking by myself.
Mm.
Might have a can of pop, 2 6 of Crown Royal, boom, boom, chasing one with the other. I was missing work. I just
Mm-hmm.
thought, hey, I'm young and alcohol's all around us, right? This is normal. I was probably also in a lot of denial at that time too.
Mm.
I actually got caught in the bar in the middle of the playoffs by my owner, the owner of the team. Just walks up to me. He's like, looks at me. He's like, "What are you doing?" I was
Mm-hmm.
the leading point getter on our team at that point, I think, in the playoffs. And I had this ego, this fake confidence
Mm-hmm.
that I guess protected the ego. I was
Mm.
struggling to find my identity, but I put my identity and worth into sports and what people thought of me, not realizing that everything that mattered was what I thought of myself. So when I was 21, I aged out of junior hockey, and I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't identify what it was. I wasn't happy, but I just kept going with the flow, right? I don't know anything about depression, about mental health. This is now 19 years ago. So I moved to Vancouver, and what does an alcoholic do when, he wants to be around alcohol? I became a bartender.
Mm.
So now I'm a bartender, an alcoholic bartender at 21 in Vancouver. And I'm working at a casino in the heart of False Creek Harbor, which is right off Granville Strip, where all the nightclubs are. And I'm drinking every day now. I would literally get as drunk as I could, like within that 40 minutes before the bar shut down, because I got off work and I'd have to go to a place that was open for another hour, and I'd go by myself. I'd try to get people to go with me. And, I'm there and just hoping and praying that these are my buddies. They're not going to see me doing triple vodka cranberries, do the lean on the bar by myself, and we ended up becoming friends, all of us. And then one night, a bartender that I worked with came up to me, and he knew my habits at work at the casino I worked at. Everybody knew I was an alcoholic. And he approached me and says, Justin, can I ask you something? I said, yeah, sure. He says, Justin, do you think you drink too much? And I looked at him and I said, there's no way I drink too much, fully knowing that he is actually a recovering alcoholic. I knew that. He told me his story. He told me why he doesn't drink.
Mm.
So later that night, I did what I always did. I closed up the bar within 15, 20 minutes, went out for power half hour, got as drunk as I could. I started walking home, and eventually, living in Vancouver long enough, I found the number to dial a bottle so I could have
Mm.
alcohol delivered to my house. Then I quickly found that they did something else. They delivered something else. They delivered party favors. They delivered drugs, right?
Wow.
So that escalated. But that one night, I start walking home across the Cambie Street Bridge in Vancouver. A thought rings through my head, and it's this guy's voice. Justin, do you drink too much? And I'm 24 at this point. Like, there's no way I drink too much. I'm young. I like to have fun. I'm in this big, beautiful city of Vancouver, and I'm a bartender. There's no way I drink too much. So I took a couple more steps and a couple more steps, and the thought rings through my head again and says, Justin, are you an alcoholic? Well, all of a sudden, I had this warm feeling rush up through my body. And I knew I was an alcoholic. But I said this word for word. There's no way I'm an alcoholic. I go to work. I pay my bills. I'm not a low life, and I'm too smart to be an alcoholic. I was scared. I had this warm feeling, and I was so scared of the answer. I knew it. I was, but I just kept thinking that can't be me. That can't be me. Those are low lives. Those are failures. Those are weirdos. That's not you, Justin. That's not you. I was in such denial, and I was so smart, in fact, that I graduated that year at 24 years old from alcohol misuse to drug misuse. At 24 years old, I tried for the very first time, and I didn't remember the night. So I phoned up a buddy of mine. I said, man, what happened last night? And he told me that I did drugs. And I was like, holy cow. Well, but then he said something to me that you probably shouldn't say to a person with my mindset. He said, man, you were funny last night. Oh, right. And then there it clicked. I got alcohol for confidence. I got drugs to be funny. I got Michael's special juice from Space Jam. I was turning into this person that I always didn't like. Whatever I could get to help me feel good, I would go after, right? Even if that meant trying to pick up a girl, trying to flirt with girls, one night stands. It wasn't longer until I moved back home to Salmon Arm and I started managing a nightclub. I lost my license for drinking and driving, and I just never went to get it back for about 4 years. So I had to take the drinking and driving course. I was sitting outside a gas station. I drove to like a block over to the gas station from my house to get munchies. And I'm hammered. Cops I had to get my buddy to come pick up the car, who didn't have a license at the time. Picks up the car, takes it home for me, and I just walk home. I went to the nightclub. This is the last thing I remember. He's going to the nightclub, having some drinks. Next thing I know, I'm in the back of an ambulance, and the guy's flashing a light in my eyes, and I didn't know what happened. I actually was going around a corner and going up a hill, and I didn't make the turn. I might have fallen asleep. I wasn't paying attention. I don't know. But I pushed the pole into almost the front seat of the car. I wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and they found my hair in the window. All I know is like there was blood on the passenger seat of the car where I probably hit and then passed out or got knocked out or whatever. So they took my license, and I moved home, and I didn't deal with it, right? So I'm getting a ride home every night. And all of a sudden, my buddy and I started talking about the topic of depression. Was it some sort of sadness? So I looked at him and I said, depression is for the weak. Depression is an excuse. You got to man up. You got to go to work, and you got to pay your bills. So I am putting on this mask still. I have this mask that I put on as a little kid that I brought with me through junior high into high school. And now it's in adulthood. I'm putting on this facade where this is how I want you to view me. Alcoholism is for lowlifes. Drugs are for bad people. And depression is for the weak. So here I am labeling all these things that I'm essentially struggling with. And for 4 years, I bounced around, right? From city to town to I live here to live here, bartending, getting fired. Eventually, I got fired from a job in Edmonton. And, I had nowhere to go. I had to come home, right? I had nowhere to go. I was wearing out my welcome. The friends I was hanging out with that were trying to support me, that would find 6 bottles of vodka. I would get up in the morning and just drink them by like 1 p.m., maybe 2 p.m. That's when I started to drink alcohol straight. It was a belief, right? It was a habitual belief that if I had this much alcohol in my system, I'm a funnier, more loving guy to be around. Oh, I guess a lot of people probably think, oh man, I'm a really good dancer. I just got to have 6 beers, right?
I think that's what everybody thinks.
And I even transferred into hanging out with friends or to go into sports before I played hockey. Oh, you know what? I have to have like 3 or 4 double ryes so I can go play hockey. It's going to calm my nerves, because I didn't really recognize that I was dealing with anxiety. I was dealing with depression, and I was dealing with ADHD, undiagnosed. So when I moved home at 28, I started to find out what depression was. You misuse drugs and alcohol. You should probably ask for help. So I asked for help at 28, and I was diagnosed with clinical depression, which is a sadness that persists for longer than 2 weeks at a time. I was diagnosed with social and general anxiety. I didn't know I was dealing with all these undiagnosed mental illnesses until about 28, 29, 30, and it started to make a lot of sense. But when I got diagnosed with that, for me, it was kind of a relief because I started to think, Justin, you're just a mess up. You're a fuck up. You're a failure. You're pathetic. You're a loser. But that actually kind of gave me a little bit of relief. But then I started to, okay, what makes my depression better? Alcohol, cocaine, right? So, I'm going to do this and this, and I'm going to feel better. And my family's telling me I need to quit this. Why do they want me to quit something that helps me?
Oof.
Like, I'm losing everything around me. Jobs. I'm moving home. I live in my mom's basement suite at 28 and no job. But I can still drink. I can still get drugs. I'm trying to get sober. I was, because I could see that I was losing things around me. I didn't know what to do sober. Right? I was inconsistent with my medication. I was inconsistent with going to my counseling appointments because I hated going in there and talking to her. I had a hard time looking at her in the eye. I remember one time I went into a counseling appointment and I was shaking and, I was visibly sick. I just came off a 3-day bender where I blacked out. And that actually started to become an occurrence for me, is I blacked out really easy. And I would black out for days on end, coherent enough to somehow get alcohol.
Wow.
Yeah, made phone calls, didn't eat.
What were your thoughts when you woke up from a 3-day blackout? Like, that's pretty intense, man.
Do you know what? For those 3 days that I blacked out, I didn't know if I was angry. I didn't know if I was depressed. And I didn't know if I was suicidal. So at that time, when I asked for help at 28, I started to become suicidal. My days started to get dark. I hated leaving my room. I put tinfoil up on my windows, but it was almost like I was afraid of the light. Like I just wanted to be dark, and I just would watch TV all day, or I'd get drunk and high by myself because I was choosing using over feeling, right? I was ignoring my feelings because I was scared of them. It's I was the outcast of my friends. I was the outcast of my family. I felt like I can't keep my life together. So what can I do? Well, I can escape it. I met this girl and we were hanging out, and she had to leave me because I was just a mess. I was using and drinking a lot, and we tried to live together, but it wouldn't work. And I was hiding alcohol from her, and we had a bottle of vodka in the freezer, and I'm taking sips out of it, replacing it with water. What doesn't freeze?
Water.
Alcohol.
Oh, sorry,
what does freeze?
Alcohol.
What does freeze? Water.
I failed that chemistry test.
This vodka's freezing. You dumbass.
Yeah.
And I'd hide it in my pillowcases, and I just hid alcohol, so we weren't working, and but we broke up and we kept talking, right? And we ended up hooking up on my birthday. And then about 3 months later, she calls me, and she's like, Justin, I'm pregnant. First thing you would want to think, because I always wanted to be a dad. Like, I knew I wanted to be a dad. I loved kids, but I always thought I'd be joyous and have this great feeling that, yeah, I'm going to be a dad. But the first thing that came through my mind was, Justin, you can't even take care of yourself. How are you going to take care of this kid? What if your son turns out to be like you? She told me, she's like, Justin, I'm keeping the kid. Whether you want to be in the kid's life or not, I'm keeping this kid. And I said, I want to be in this kid's life. So we decided to get back together and try to make it work. All of a sudden, I decided to go for a joyride, drinking and driving. And I go to merge onto the highway, and I hit somebody. I have open alcohol in my vehicle. I get another 24-hour, and I get home, and I'm like, man, I have a kid on the way. I need to do something about this. I was embarrassed because a lot of people knew, right? And I think that kind of trumped the I have a kid on the way card. I think I was just embarrassed, and I needed to get out. And I was fighting with my counselor for quite a while of going to rehab. There's a stigma in rehab. It's for the failures, right? It's for the weak or whatever. Finally, I said, okay, I got to go to rehab. And, I went to rehab, and I went to all my classes. And, when she dropped me off, So my girlfriend, she's pregnant. She drops me off, and I'm fighting back tears because there's 60 men in that building, right? 60 guys that, some are there because they're sentenced to from jail, right? Some are there willingly. Some have to be there, and I can't show weakness. I got to go in. I got to be a man, right? And I remember walking in there and be like, holy cow, like it's a 4-story building. There's all these dudes I don't know. All our coping mechanisms are taken away, except for you're allowed to smoke. And I was chewing tobacco at the time. I liked rehab. I wasn't the black sheep anymore, man. Rehab was easy for me.
You said that it was mostly embarrassment that really pushed you into rehab. Now, to me, that's ego.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it. I never actually looked at it that way, and because I talked about ego in the beginning, and
then it was ultimately ego that pushed you into rehab. Good old ego.
But I got to see a different part of me.
What part was that?
But that I'm not a bad guy.
You thought you were?
I do care about people. Oh yeah, I'm taking somebody else's spot. Like somebody else deserves to be here, wants to be here, might be waiting for a bed. So you better go. But I had a little more connection there, right? That I was missing in my life because I always felt like an outsider. But then graduation came and, I did a speech, which was pretty cool. I got out and the first thing I said when I got out of rehab was, I'm not done drinking forever.
Bum, bum, bum.
Boom. Yeah. I just spent 35 days away from my pregnant girlfriend at home. Oh, you can probably guess what happened. A month later, we have our son. 2 months after that, I start hitting the bottle hard again, making bad decisions. I went and picked up my sister from the airport. I sat in the back and I drank Crown or spiced rum or something by myself.
That was your reintroduction to drinking.
With my son beside me. So 6 months after that day, my girlfriend made probably the toughest decision of her life, pack up my son and leave me at my lowest point. Car accident where I probably could have died. Doesn't change me. Rehab didn't change me. Having a son didn't change me. Having my girlfriend leave with my son, watching them walk out that door, didn't change me. 2 years before that, I started hanging out with the wrong people, and I ripped them off to where they put me in the back of a vehicle and beat me up. And they said, you're lucky we don't put you in that river. Didn't change me. Man, I could have died. How many times? Like, I had a gun pointed at my face in Surrey, outside a nightclub. None of that was getting through to me. And it's like I wasn't scared to die, or maybe I was wanting somebody to do it for me almost. When you're in that stage, the love from others just doesn't seem like it's enough. That's what I wanted, I think, was to accept myself for who I was. And I couldn't give that to myself. I'm seeing my son twice a week for 4 hours at a time. I can't drive with him in my car per court order, right? And one day my ex dropped off my son because she's a good mom. She wanted her son to see his dad. And that day I was struggling, man. I was angry. I was upset. I was depressed, irritable, confused, lost, and I was suicidal. But I can't tell her that, man. Like, what if I told her that? And all of a sudden I can't see my son, right? Because someone might think I'm an unfit father, or I'm a danger to him, or he's going to get hurt. People don't know I'm suicidal. Every time my counselor asks me, I always say no, because I'm scared that my son's going to get taken away from me. Because there's one thing I had in life at that time it was this little boy. But even when I had him, man, I would stare at him and think, you deserve better than me. Or there'd be times I'd want to give him back to his mom so I could drink. Oh, I'd make up an excuse. Hey, can you come pick him up? But there was a time she dropped him off and I was struggling, and what does a 2-year-old want to do when he sees his dad? Well, he wants to play with daddy. And so I took him to the store, got him some chips and some candy, and we went back home and I put him in front of the TV. And as he sat there, I walked in behind him and I started to stare at the back of his head, and I started to ask myself, Justin, are you going to make it see him graduate, get married, teach him to ride a bike, or even to score his first goal in hockey? And the answer inevitably every single time was no. I couldn't picture myself in his future. And that started to become evident to me when I was hospitalized for the third time. The second time, actually, 2 weeks with alcohol poisoning. And as I laid up in that bed, I was pasty. I was shaky. My hands were going numb. I couldn't keep water down. I had an IV into my arm. My ex brought down my son so I could see him. And I'll never forget the way he looked at me and what he said when he walked through those curtains. He said, "Mommy, what's wrong with Daddy?" Well, right then and there, it clicked for me. I need to end this. I need to end this so that he is a father that he deserves. You know, not a father's going to miss time with him because he's using. Not a father's going to miss time with him because he's in a hospital bed because of alcohol poisoning. But he needs a father who's going to, teach him the ways of life. He's going to pick him up when he falls down. And that just wasn't me. So I started to get that mindset. Justin, you need to end your life so he has a better dad. Your friends and family, they'll understand, right? They don't want to see you struggling anymore. My ex, she's smart, she's intelligent, she's beautiful, she's kind, she's got a massive heart. She'll find a dad that he deserves. And for that 2-year-old, he's not going to remember me. So I just end it now. Now, when you get to that mindset that the world's better off without you, it's very hard to get out of it, right? Because you become your thoughts, right? What you think about those I am statements, right? Like, I'm a failure, I'm pathetic, I'm a loser, I deserve to die. You start to truly believe them. And then those beliefs start to control your actions, right? I woke up one day, there was a knife in my bed, blood on the sheets, and my wrist was cut. And I was so scared, man. I put these, the rubber wristbands that people wear. I put like 3 of those around my wrist. I went to my mom's makeup cabinet. I got a bunch of that and I started putting it on my wrist to go to work so people wouldn't see it. Now I'm probably maybe a centimeter away from not being alive anymore. And I don't remember it. I don't know if I wanted to die at that point or what I wanted. I'm lucky I didn't get too deep. Eventually it came to the point where I went to the DMV and I remember walking in there and I wanted to become an organ donor so I could prepare my body to die and I could give my body to someone else. I legitimately thought somebody else deserved my body more than me. So I was trying to quit drinking as much as I could. I got milk thistle from my liver so I could try to heal it and kidney flush so I could essentially prepare my body to die. And I remember walking into the DMV and looking at this lady saying, I want to be an organ donor. And I remember her curly brown hair. She's just smiling. Oh, you're doing such an amazing thing. And I remember thinking, well, if you only knew, if you only knew. Mm-hmm. So I became an organ donor and I come to the point where I'm like, Justin, you need to go back to rehab. So I started to listen to motivational speaking around this time. And I found that all these motivational speakers had one thing in common. Find your why. So I started to ask myself, okay, Justin, well, what is your why? What is your why that's going to drive you and motivate you to get better? What is your why that's going to pick you up when you fall down? What is your why that's going to allow you to get uncomfortable and do the things you don't want to do? Well, one of the things I didn't want to do was go back to rehab. That's for sure. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to look like a 2-time rehab guy, but I did. I saw my son as my anchor. I made him my anchor. And so I started to reframe my thoughts. So I started to think, okay, well, what if instead of ending it so he is a better dad, well, what if I get better for him and I become that dad that he needs? If I get better for him, I get better for me. If I get better for me, I can actually help other people. And this is where I talk about the power of the why, right? Is that people are going to say you have to do it for yourself and you should do it for yourself. But I know for a lot of guys, a lot of people, especially, ones I went to rehab with, we could not do it for ourselves. So we had to find a why to do it for. And because I got better for my son, I eventually got better for me, right? So with that, I made my son my why, I made it my anchor, and I went back to rehab for the second time. But this time, when I went back to rehab, I went with the power of why. Instead of trying to worry about the substance, which rehab doesn't usually do, they worry about the why and the how, right? The why do you use? How are you going to get better? So my mindset was why? Why do I use? Because I'm depressed. Why am I depressed? I got low self-esteem, low self-worth, and low self-confidence. Well, why do you have that? Well, it's because I didn't learn how to deal with my operating system, my mental health. One of the first days in rehab, we were allowed to go for a walk as a group. And we walk around the strip mall that was beside the rehab center. And we happened to look to the left and we all noticed a building that was one of our, allies, I guess you could say. There's a liquor store, but there was a sign outside the liquor store in big block letters spelled perfectly correct that says BC wine is cheaper than therapy. Like,
Wow.
those guys don't know the cost of rehab. those, they don't know the cost of doing the drinking and driving course
Yeah.
or the insurance premiums.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Or the hospital visits.
Or the things, or the hospital visits. It's
lost
like,
jobs.
yeah, it was funny to see, right? But in rehab, they started going over the things on the how, right? We went over the importance of gratitude, being grateful for the things you have in your life, reminding yourself daily of those things you have in your life, because, scientifically proven to rewire your neuroplasticity, that, the connections you have in your brain for happiness, as long as it's done consistently, right? Like, and if you have a hard time with gratitude, how you have to attach a feeling to it. Like, okay, I'm grateful for this. Oh, that's nice. Okay, can you attach a feeling to that? Like, if I didn't have this tomorrow, how would I feel, right? And so they taught us about gratitude, journaling. The power of journaling. Getting your thoughts out of your head, because that's half the battle. The correlation between gut health and mental health, right? Like diet, the importance of diet and exercise, and releasing those chemicals in your bodies. Oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, your happy chemicals, your reward chemicals. But one of the biggest things I learned in rehab, which eventually I learned in life coaching, was the power of acceptance and forgiveness. And how acceptance and forgiveness is actually for us. How in life you're going to go through bad experiences. You will go through probably a trauma that is very hard. You may lose a loved one. Someone will probably hurt you along the way, and it might be someone you love or a close friend, right? But the first thing you got to do to get over that, so that you can move on, is accept that it really happened, right? But here's the thing that they said is, like, you have to accept it, but that doesn't mean you have to like it, right? Like, some people be like, oh, I got to accept it. That means I got to like it. No, you don't have to like it. You just got to acknowledge it, that this happened. Like how I had to acknowledge that I was struggling with my mental health, how I was misusing substances. I would have to acknowledge that these things happened in my life. This is my truth. These are real. And then you have to forgive it. And the forgiveness is the hardest part. But here's the thing about forgiveness. Forgiveness is for you. And then they said one of the things that, really resonated with me, that really got to me, is that if someone hurts you, you have to forgive them. But you don't have to forgive them to their face, right? They don't even have to know about it, but you got to forgive them for you, so you can stop living in your past, stop reliving that moment, and start to create that future that you desire. But here's the thing, is that for guys like me, and maybe a lot of other people, is that thing you're going to have to accept is something you did. And that person you have to forgive is yourself, because we all make mistakes. And the anger week that we covered, I thought I wasn't going to make it. This time I'm in rehab with 22 guys, and people are cutthroat. They are yelling at each other. They are getting in each other's faces. And it's like, hey guys, let's give up our coping mechanisms. Let's all sit in a room. Let's talk about our feelings. Go. Holy, I didn't think I was going to make it. Like that was hard, man.
Yeah.
That was hard, but we go through it. We talked about guilt and shame, the difference between something you did, and guilt is you did something wrong, but shame is you are wrong or you are bad, right? And that's when you start to label yourself as something, and it's hard to get out of the shame, and you get into this shame loop that goes into guilt, and you can't. I'm going to tell you something: you can never shame your way out of anything. Right? I'm not going to shame my way out of alcoholism. So we learned about all these tools, right? And I'm feeling good. I did another speech. I got a rehab. I'm feeling great. My buddy had a job waiting for me when I got out of rehab, and it was to be a car salesman. I'm like, okay, this could be cool. Work with a buddy, make good money. Well, I still have social anxiety, right? I'm fresh out of rehab, and they tell you not to make. This is what they tell you when you get out of rehab. Don't make huge life decisions within a year. I'm like, okay, well, car salesman is not too bad. But I had really bad social anxiety. And here I am put into a place where I don't know anything about vehicles. I'm going to work every day. I don't like talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to banter with people. They're like, well, I only want a vehicle if I get this, this, and this. I'm like, well, I don't care what you want. And 3 months hits, the pink cloud starts to get real. That pink cloud of this is your life. Like
Yeah.
you gotta stay sober, Justin. You gotta deal with your problems. And I quit my medication. I quit my counseling appointments, and I start drinking again. You
Mm.
know, and I'm controlling it for the most part in the beginning
Mm-hmm.
until finally New Year's hits, and I'm blackout, do drugs. Next day, I phone up my manager. I don't even know what we talked about, but somehow I quit or we mutually parted ways. 3 days later, I come to, oh man, I got no job again. I'm drinking, do drugs, go pick up more alcohol, and drink. I picked up a 40 of alcohol. At this point, I didn't get to see my kid because I was just, I was a mess. My ex can get a hold of me, right? And I'm not returning her calls.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do, I go get more alcohol and keep getting blackout drunk until finally July 4th, 2019 hits. I come to and I wake up on the couch. It's probably 8 in the morning, and there's some light cracking through the blinds, and I start noticing, my kid's toys in the corner. I notice his hockey stick on the ground, and I just look at pictures of him and and I was tasked with making a choice at that time. And at that time, I'm like, Justin, you have two choices. You can continue down this path of self-destruction, self-hatred, substance misuse, and you'll probably lose your life. And your son will grow up without his biological dad. Or you can ask for help. You can get help. And you can be truthful and you can be honest and you can tell people about the storm that's going on in your head. With that, I actually phoned my mom. She left work. I was living underneath her still. She left work. She came and picked me up. And I said, you need to take me to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and with my mom to my left of me, my dad in front of me, or was my dad to the left, doesn't matter. They were both in that room. Counselor to my right. I finally admitted out loud that if I was going to continue to feel the way that I did, that I had a plan, and that plan was to end it. That I couldn't handle feeling this anymore. I don't want to be here. And on that day, that saying those out loud just lifted this weight off my shoulder.
Mm.
The hardest things to do is tell the truth. Right? Ego, embarrassment, whatever it is, right? And that took a weight off my shoulders. I was allowed to go back home with my mom that night. And from that day, I've been sober ever since.
Mm. Let's take a quick break. I'm going to read off today's sponsors and then we'll keep going. Okay, EHN Canada is Canada's leading provider of mental health and addiction services, providing evidence-based and medically assisted care with 1-year wraparound services for those suffering from substance use disorder. To learn more, find their link in the show notes below. Métis Nation Saskatchewan has announced its path for the pursuit of self-government. As an MNS citizen, I am proud to see my government fight to protect my rights. This is our moment. To learn more about the treaty and our path to self-government, go to ourmoment.ca. Wellness News Choice for Healthy Living is a local resource that works to connect people with health and wellness-related products, services, and expert advice from industry professionals locally, allowing us to connect and engage. Check out wellnessnews.ca or skwellnesshub.ca today to learn more. To make contact or to learn more about today's sponsors, to check out our merch, or if you want to show us some love and buy us a coffee, all of those links are also in the show notes below. So what was different this time? It seemed like 2 times you've gone to rehab, and 2 times for sure you recognized that life was unmanageable with alcohol and drugs in it, and 2 times you went back. So what changed this time?
When you get that, you're trying to find an answer to a math problem. If you ever forget something and then all of a sudden you remember and it clicks.
Oh, like every day. Yeah.
Yeah, it clicked.
Okay.
For me, it clicked that day. I was so fed up with the life I was living that I could either become a statistic, 2 different types of statistics, let's just say.
Mm-hmm.
I could become someone that I was proud of, or I could go down that path and be someone that, came to their circumstances, right? And that day I knew it was one day at a time. I knew it was commitment. So I grabbed a calendar and I would mark an X on every day. Man, did that feel good. Every day, boom.
Miracle.
Boom. Okay, I'm getting sober, and I'm still off work at this point. It started to feel good. I committed to my medication, committed to my appointments. I committed to journaling, like getting my thoughts out of my head. I committed to working out. I was eating healthy. I started becoming a dad that was more involved. I started to notice that I kept smiling at my ex, right? And because she always kept in touch. And then I wanted to hang out. And then we started to hang out. Well, all of a sudden we got back together. 6 months out of hospitalized myself, 8 months out of rehab or 9 months out of rehab, we actually got back together. With that, I went back to school to be a speaker, to be a life coach. I went back to work, and I started down this amazing path of being a speaker, being a coach, being a dad, and living that sobriety journey that I always dreamt of. Now, they say don't make life decisions within the first year. I'm gonna tell you, I'm glad I did it.
That up,
but it was hard, very hard, worth it. But I now see why, because I was that guy that always went against the grain, right?
Well, getting back together with your ex is a pretty significant life decision.
I was used to being alone, right? Used to be alone. And then now all of a sudden I got people in my space. It was hard for me, very hard. And sometimes, because I'm the guy that I like my space. Yeah. Like going to the gym. I like my space, and it's hard. We now have 2 kids, right? And we got married.
Not in the first year,
so
though.
It was, no, we got married last year.
Oh, okay.
So we have now been together 5 years. So, but you know what? This last 5 years have been some of the hardest of my life. The things that I've gone through, the personal loss. So we got back together, and we wanted to have another kid, and we lost one first. And then we found out we were pregnant again, and we're a bit older. So we went and got tested because we knew there's a chance the baby could have Down syndrome. And so we just wanted to get tested, right? And it came back that there's a 99% chance. She did a blood test. So what they do is they send us down to Vancouver to the women's hospital. So we knew we had to go down to the children's hospital and stay at the Ronald McDonald House for a month. She went down 3 weeks before the due date. And that whole whole summer, I was working out almost every day, 12 hours a day, living off black coffee. My diet was going to crap because I couldn't eat. I got off work, could take a melatonin because I couldn't sleep, right? Drink coffee all day, melatonin at night. Just the healthiest lifestyle ever. Mac and cheese. Let's go.
Better than 40s and blow.
Is it?
I don't know, man. I'll probably edit that out.
Yeah. Probably. But I take melatonin at night, and she gives me a call. She's like, my water broke. I'm like, oh man, what do I do here? Do I drive on the melatonin? Which I probably could have, but that's dangerous. You never know. I don't want to hurt somebody else. So I go to sleep for 4 hours, get up, drive to Vancouver, which is about 5-hour drive from my house. And baby comes early, 3 weeks early, but she's still 5 pounds. But she has a surgery the next day. She's attached to all these tubes. You can't lift her up. You can't hold her. And then a day later, they whisk her off for surgery on her intestine. This little baby. So surgery comes back successful. And they wanted us to go home after a month and then come back when she was bigger for her heart surgery. So we ended up staying there for about 6 months at the Ronald McDonald House. And it didn't hit me until 3 months in. Holy cow, this is our life. Sounds of the beeps. The heart surgery day comes up. And that's when things get real, man. And then they take your baby away again. And so they took her away for the heart surgery. And they said usually the first 12 hours is the scariest after, and then it's usually in the clear. 18 hours after the surgery, we still couldn't see her. I get a phone call. And on that phone call, I found out that she flatlined for 2 minutes. and her lung collapsed, and they had to bring her back to life, and they almost had to put her on ECMO. And all you want to do is go see her, but they said no. There's 12 doctors in the room. Don't come see her. You're sitting there. You just want to go do something. And my wife's like, "Don't go. They told you not to go." So I didn't go. But the next morning, we went to see our daughter, and her chest is a little open. She has it looks like a baseball patch in the middle, and her one eye's kind of open, and it you start to think back on your life, and things just seem like a dream. I sat down, like my wife's upset, right? Because there's our baby girl, and I just start to think, like, did my choices, for the reasons I hurt people, right? Did this lead to this? Am I getting punished? Like, why is all these things happening? And how could they all happen? Like, it feels numb, but it doesn't feel real. And the old me would go right back to drinking. Eventually, we were allowed to go home, and we got home, and life was different. And I start to burn out bad. When you leave the house, you do the wallet, keys, phone check.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing the feeding bags, the food, the air cylinder, the machine for this cylinder, the machine for the feeding stuff, the backpack, and that we got to do that every time we leave the house. And you really start to find out what sobriety taught me, when people can get past their demons and conquer them, going from to user to being sober, the strength that it takes to get there, but not only that, the strength that it gives you to kind of be resilient.
Mm-hmm. Was there any thoughts of drinking or using? Was there any, and whether those be like thoughts of gratitude because you're not anymore, or thoughts of maybe going back because you can't handle it? Like, let's talk a little bit about what your recovery looked like through that.
So my recovery at that time was important to me, extremely important, because I had a lot of responsibility at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there were times I wanted to use 100%. I could just go use, but I knew I would lose everything. But I was also grateful that I didn't. I like to tell people your why needs to be greater than your want and stronger than your struggle. And my why was my son, my daughter, my wife, but my why was also myself. And being able to speak, at schools at that time as well, to kids, to teach them about mental health, about what substance use can really do. But yeah, it was hard to not. I had my cravings, and I was having using dreams that seemed very real. The disappointment you have when you get up and it takes you a second to come into real life, that you didn't use, you didn't mess up all those days. It was a struggle to not use, but it was also, it taught me of how resilient I could be. And we also wanted to have another one, and we thought we were in the clear at like 16 weeks. We lost that one in not a very nice way. That one made me angry. I'm supposed to be a dad of 6. I'm a dad of 2. And a lot of that came after I got sober. But I was able to stay strong through it because I got sober. I don't know how I would have been through all this if I was still using. I could still get down. I could still get irritable. I could still get depressed sometimes. And what I realized is that community, connection is huge, because I did go straight to work, straight to school, straight to volunteering, straight to family, straight to making myself busy over making myself better. And I do still see a counselor again. I realize that, hey, you know what? I don't want to go backwards. Are you successful if you're not taking care of yourself? You can be as successful as you want on paper, but if you're losing the things that matter the most, like your health, right, and a little bit of connection you have with your family, that's not success at all. So make sure when you get into your sobriety journey, you don't leave that stuff behind. You don't leave those tools behind. You don't stop doing your coping mechanisms, because for us, recovery is life. It's a way of life. It is life. It is what you need to do for the rest of it. And that's okay. Take it one day at a time. but make sure that you continue to put yourself up there, your recovery up there, and that if you feel like you can't do it alone, you have that support, that group of people that you can trust to tell you, there might be something that you want to hear, something that you need to hear, something you don't want to hear.
The things you want in life are on the other side of the work you don't want to do.
Yeah, George Adair, everything you could ever want is sitting for you on the other side of fear.
So, thanks for joining me today. Where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at Justin Brien 19. That's JUSTINBRIEN 19 on Instagram. Justin Inspiration on TikTok. Just Justin Brien on Facebook. Or you can visit my website, www.justinbrien.com. You can book me to speak, book me to coach through my website. You can find my book, Chasing Shadows, Fighting the Monster Within. It's separated into 3 parts: life during alcohol, life after alcohol, and then learning lessons that I've learned through rehab and life coaching, and just making really poor decisions that work for me, make better. You can get that book on basically any outlet, Chapters, Indigo, Amazon, ebook, Kindle. You can get it anywhere.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure and an honor walking with you through your journey. Thank you for sharing it with our community here on Hard Knocks Talks. And I suppose that's it. Take good care, Justin.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be on your show.